Okay, so we can kick this off. I think some people are still coming in, but the session will be recorded. So if you have any colleagues who are showing up late, we can share the video with them. Thank you everyone for coming. This webinar is a presentation of data derived from a new tool called the Water Investment Navigator that we, Global Water Intelligence, have been building in collaboration with the Water Environment Federation. Basically, it's a decision intelligence tool that leverages AI. It will be the best in class in terms of research for North American water and wastewater public water agencies. First, we have Ray from the Water Environment Federation. He's just going to give a little bit of introduction into the partnership. Then Luke is going to present the data. Then we can have a quick look at the tool that the data is generated from, and then we'll have a sort of short Q&A. So if you have any questions during the presentation, just type them into the questions box, and we will either address them at the end or we will address them through the presentation as is suitable. Anyway, over to you, Ray.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming on. This is our second webinar. The Water Environment Federation, when we were approached by GWI about this tool, we thought that this was a really great way for our members and our customers to get better and more information without all the noise. And so we are really supporting this effort. Our team here in the US and our business development team and our sales team is working very closely with various customers and closely with the GWI team. And we feel like this is going to be a great tool for our members, and we want you to feel free to reach out to us or reach out to GWI with any questions after we're done. So thank you so much.
Over to you, Luke.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Ray. So just to show the sort of power of wind today, I'm going to talk through the sort of future trajectory of the US water and wastewater municipal market using data entirely sourced from Water Investment Navigator. And the way I've kind of been explaining Water Investment Navigator is that it's a data platform that gives you rolling, real-time access to the projects water and wastewater agencies are undertaking, the kind of decisions they're making at their meetings, and how the wider supply chain in North America, people like engineering firms, construction companies, equipment suppliers, are engaging with those opportunities. Now, we know a lot of people use existing data services or sort of even do market analysis and client evaluation in-house. But the real difference with WIN is that it condenses sort of thousands of documents each week to draw the insights that you require for your business without wasting time or energy being swamped with leads or resources that are irrelevant to you. So we're essentially saying it has the power of hiring a large team of industry experts to procure information for you each day. And we do that with both AI, but we also have some strong human oversight to ensure all of the data is accurate and up to date. So everything you're going to see in this presentation is sourced directly from the WIN dashboard. And we're going to use this data to give you a real forward-looking view that you could recreate yourselves with access to the program. Next slide, please. So the first thing I think is important to do is really set the scene to this presentation. And today we're really asking, how sustainable is the big surge in investment in water and wastewater infrastructure we've seen over the last few years? So on the slide in front of us, we have an index of annualized capital spending in sewerage and water infrastructure in the public sector. And this just tells us how much has changed in the space of the last 4 years. What we've seen from around 2021 onwards is nothing short of incredible, really, in the North American market. We've seen close to 40 billion uplift in combined annual spending. And I think this has chiefly been driven by 3 major forces we've seen. The first being, of course, huge inflation on things like equipment and materials in the capital projects market, which has sparked significant scope revisions and cost escalations on projects. And these dynamics have also at the same time begun to trigger a wider migration of project risk from the supply side of the market back to owners and clients. The second real driver of this, it's good news in a way, it's that utilities have been able to absorb a lot of these costs and adapt to the new normal by pushing through really aggressive rate rises. You know, we've seen utilities since 2021 go to their boards and councils and get significant cost increases. And we've also seen them start to explore adding fixed costs to their rate structures, which has been one of the biggest sort of positives over the last few years in terms of revenue sustainability. At the same time, I mean, since 2021, what we have seen is more and more projects are really becoming non-deferrable, given the sort of intense regulatory programs we're seeing. And this is both at the kind of federal level, around things like emerging contaminants, PFAS and lead, but also at the state level. We've seen a lot of ambitious state rulemaking, especially on the wastewater side of the market, that has really just added to these spending drivers that we've seen. So the last 4 years have been an incredible increase in the pace of infrastructure investment, but the positive is that that has been matched by an increasing willingness to get rate increases over the line. Next slide, please. So all of these forces that I've talked about leads to 2026, which appears to be another standout year for water and wastewater infrastructure investment across the US and Canada. And we've broken WIN's capital investment data down here to show the top 5 states, each split by the major applications in that state. And these numbers are calculated from categorizing and aggregating investment data from the 50,000 active municipal projects that we have in our database. So each dollar on this slide is a dollar that is actually part of a planned line item project that you could identify on WIN. I'm just going to do a very quick state-by-state run through here to explain some of the drivers we're seeing geographically. California obviously leads the way. It's come off the back of a long multi-year drought, and we've seen some of the most ambitious capital plans in this region really linked to shielding water and wastewater agencies from future supply risks. More utilities are pursuing things like reuse and groundwater recharge, but at the same time, the spending in California is also driven on the wastewater side by some very strict local discharge rules around nutrients in places like the Bay Area. But also there's a drive to upgrade wastewater treatment plants as part of reuse programs to provide tertiary effluent to downstream purification facilities. So those are some of the drivers that have made California top in terms of spending. Moving over to Texas, Texas has probably been one of the biggest growth stories we've seen in recent years in terms of infrastructure investment. We've really seen the gap between California and Texas certainly narrow since we last started collecting this kind of data. And here we have CapEx in the state very much tied to those sort of same drought mitigation dynamics, but also we're seeing significant growth in major metropolitan areas, which demands things like additional wastewater treatment capacity. We're also seeing signs of an industrial boom in the state, which has also forced cities to really balance residential needs with the new sources of supply required to fuel industries like green hydrogen or data centers. So the industrial side really plays into that high infrastructure investment in Texas as well. I think one of the most promising stories from these two leading states, from California and Texas, has really been the step up in state funding in recent years. So in California, Proposition 4, the climate bond, provides significant capital available for new supply projects, as does Texas's own state water fund, which is earmarking billions to unlock new supplies via methods such as desalination and reuse. So the sort of step up of state funding has been a really encouraging sign given the current federal outlook. Just briefly moving on to Florida, we've seen Florida really upping investment in stormwater infrastructure in recent years. There's a lot of worry in that state around things like insurance risk and the way climate change plays into that. So we're seeing more and more of these kind of resiliency investments that are becoming non-negotiable. And at the same time, Florida is on par with Texas in terms of wastewater treatment plant investments. Although in Florida, this is more concentrated on treatment upgrades as opposed to capacity expansions. So Florida agencies, of course, are facing a whole set of advanced treatment requirements by state regulators through to 2030. And we've seen that increasingly become a major driver of spend as we get closer towards that compliance stage. Just really quickly, finally, to Arizona and New York. Arizona actually overtook New York for the first time in 2026. And this is driven by huge infrastructure investment related to the Central Arizona project. That's the significant supply infrastructure that delivers water from the Colorado River. And we've also seen, big growth in areas like Phoenix that is being forced to increase wastewater capacity and supply capacity to account for new housing developments. And then finally, New York. New York, there's a huge focus on stormwater, reducing flooding and combined sewer overflows, along with sort of significant water transfer projects from the city of New York. So these are kind of some of the regional drivers that you can pick apart and identify with WIN. We cover the capital plans of roughly 1,000 of the top utilities by population served. So it is really the one dashboard that could provide these kind of granular insights into drivers and growth. Next slide, please. So the previous slide painted a bit of an encouraging picture as to spending in 2026. We think 2026 will be a standout year for infrastructure investment. But at the same time, when it comes to the sort of budgetary discussions that are cropping up at the start of this year, things are starting to get quite interesting. So one of Water Investment Navigator's key advantages is this ability to track discussions and decisions across the largest US water and wastewater utilities. And that gives you really sort of early insight into what's being debated, what's being planned, and where tensions are starting to emerge. So what the data shows and what this map illustrates is there's a clear rise in financial pressure from the late 2025 budget season through to the opening months of 2026. So across multiple regions, we're seeing rate proposals rejected or subject to unusually intense scrutiny. And we're seeing more than ever board members and elected officials are really weighing capital needs against things like affordability concerns. In parallel, at the same time, some utilities are drawing down cash reserves to plug some of these budget gaps, while others are being forced to trim down or defer capital spending to soften customer rate impacts. The most high-profile example of this is San Francisco. That's far left on the map. It shaved roughly $3.5 billion from its previously proposed capital program. Elsewhere in California, we've seen agencies like Metropolitan and San Diego really struggle to reconcile their sort of capital plans with revenue projections, particularly as the demand environment in California is changing so quickly. Texas offers a similar picture, from El Paso and places like San Antonio. Rate increases have ultimately been pushed through, but they have been accompanied by a real heightened political resistance. In El Paso, the mayor who sits on the utility board, publicly refused to support the latest rate proposals, which is a clear sign of how capital decisions are becoming more increasingly and visibly contested, even when they're eventually being approved. This pressure isn't confined to the West and Southwest. On the East Coast, we've seen WSSC Water facing demands from the counties it serves to stabilize its rates, which has prompted the utility to draw down cash reserves to start to bridge that gap. So I think what this map shows is what we're seeing is the era of easy money for water infrastructure investment is kind of over. The need for investment is still there. It's almost greater than ever, but the political and financial room to act on that need is definitely narrowing. And we think at GWI, it's really going to reshape how projects get funded, sequenced and delivered, and which projects within a capital plan proceed. So if ever there was an advert for something like WIN, a data tool that can track these kind of signals and indicate the resiliency of certain markets, certain projects, it would be this map. Next slide, please. I mean, despite these pressures, which we think are going to build, especially towards the second half of the year, there are some generally exciting growth opportunities in the US market. Places where WIN's data suggests that the sort of growth trends will be significant. And this is where WIN's particular segmentation abilities become powerful, because you can sort of see the specific geographies, the technologies, or the utilities that are growing quicker than the sort of average. So what I've done here is I've presented on this slide some matched panel data. So this shows the sort of same utilities reporting in both 2025, 26, and 27. What we've done is compared the rate of growth across these utilities, and we've laid out the specific growth markets that we think are most attractive or most likely to buck the overall trend. So at the top of our list of kind of exciting growth markets, we've got New York. New York, the wastewater networks investments is set to more than double over the next 4 years, largely driven by New York City's almost $500 million CSO abatement program. The city's really ramping up its sewer rehabilitation work across all 5 boroughs, and that is set to drive a significant increase in spending in that state. Moving on to California, California's growth story is really in water resources. That's at number 2 on our kind of list. This includes things like dam investments, reservoir projects, and even groundwater remediation. I think there's often a sense that California could do a lot more in terms of things like water capture. And it really seems now like a lot of the capital plans we're seeing are starting to tip further towards these kind of storage projects. Arizona is at number 3, and Arizona, the growth opportunities we see there are all about things like drinking water treatment. Population growth, as I mentioned previously, is really forcing the hand of a lot of major cities. But we've also got a new set of reuse regulations around direct potable reuse, which at the same time is opening the door for new advanced wastewater treatment and purification projects that are really on the horizon and set to drive spend going forward. Moving on to Florida, Florida's surge, as I mentioned before, is really all about stormwater from Fort Lauderdale's $300 million stormwater master plan, right through to South Florida Water Management District's flood control investments. These are investments that are increasingly non-negotiable and linked to climate resiliency. And we think particularly with these sort of climate infrastructure investments, there is definitely a sense that they sort of resist the kind of macroeconomic problems that hit other investment programs across different states. Finally, to Virginia. Virginia is it makes it into the top 5 because of drinking water treatment. That's growth that's very much anchored towards Hampton Roads' indirect potable reuse programs, which are significant investments in reuse. But also we're seeing several other municipalities in Virginia pursue big drinking water treatment upgrades, both to deal with sort of regulatory violations, but also to cater to increased growth. So although, as mentioned previously, there are some troubling signs on the horizon for water and wastewater infrastructure investment, there are still significant localized growth markets that are driven by regulation or specific customer dynamics in a certain location that you can identify and track with WIN. Next slide, please. So another thing you can do with WIN is you can look at who is winning the work behind these opportunities. So we track contract awards from across North America, which are accessed from utility meetings. And what that lets you do is it lets you identify where particular markets are concentrating and how particular companies are collaborating and competing across different municipalities. So what I've done here is I've aggregated all of the contract data that we've got in WIN as of Q4 last year. And I've presented a very quick top 10 of companies that we have identified as the top in terms of award values. Now, there are some caveats here. I suspect we'll get a few companies complaining if they don't see themselves on the list, but it's important to keep in mind that this data does only go back to Q4 2025. And by its nature, it really does favor construction firms over people like equipment suppliers or consultants, where contract values tend to be smaller and harder to capture. It's also just from large to medium-sized utilities. We're expanding our coverage to include a lot of smaller municipalities this year, but at the moment, our focus is very much on those top of 200 utilities by population served. But with all that out the way, let's go through the list. So Ghani sits at the top with nearly $1 billion of tracked awards within the wind platform. That's anchored by major program work, things like the SWIFT facility in Virginia, and also significant transmission contracts with Tampa Bay. You know, these are large-scale, long-duration infrastructure builds that the Navigator has identified. JF Share Construction is in second with a clear sort of Southern Californian focus. That's mainly due to their sort of awards around reservoir work and water transmission work for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. But what's interesting as you start coming down this table is you've got the heavy civil contractors like Ghani at the top, but you also start to see consultants like Jacobs, Brown and Caldwell, ACOM, where the award values are smaller per decision, but the footprint is much broader in terms of number of utilities worked with. So, for example, Jacobs alone appears in almost 70 individual decisions across, a significant portion of our utility coverage. So, working down the list, you've got specialist plays, people like GEI consultants, driven by kind of one-off massive contracts. That's for those specifically, that's the Anderson Dam retrofit. You can see moving to the right, we have Badger Meter. That presence is all driven by AMI. Badger Meter secured a significant 20-year deal with Charlotte Water, which we picked up in the Navigator. And again, Siemens makes the list in number 9. That's led by significant work on the Colorado River Aqueduct for various electronic equipment. And the thing about this list is it's important to note it's dynamic, so it's changing every day. Every day when we collect information, we load more data from meetings into the platform. These contract award values change and the various rankings change. So it's important to log in regularly and identify who's moving up the list, what are the sort of changing components behind these competitive dynamics. So this comes from data from around 300 utilities. We're expanding to 1,000 utilities this year, which will hopefully allow us to capture a lot more firms working with those kind of small to mid-sized utilities. But this has just been a brief presentation to give you a sense of what WIN can do, what data WIN can offer. I think I'm going to hand things back over to Jack now. Thanks, everybody.
Hello. So yes, so a few questions. I think that the main question we're getting is, what data does WIN collect and how is it verified? So there are sort of 3 main slugs of data which we collect, which are the utility CIPs. So at the moment we're tracking about 1,000 of the largest utilities by population served. So the system is constantly monitoring when a new CIP is released. The moment that is released, it's taken up and it's broken down into component parts, and you can slice and dice it in various different top down and bottom up ways. Then we have state revolving fund applications. So when a state revolving fund application is issued, we break out the usage plan, and then we use AI to link back to projects. So you can sort of use that as a signal, because obviously a lot of projects and CIPs, maybe they're a little bit more aspirational. And then we have, and I think this is the most exciting bit, is we have the agency utility committee meetings, and that's picking up. So it's picking up meeting agendas, meeting minutes. It is actually listening in to the meetings. So oftentimes now these meetings they're put live on YouTube. There's a video on YouTube. What the system actually does is it listens in on that and then passes it and relates that to individual projects and decisions. So you can sort of filter through, and we've just added one of the things that Luke will show us in a moment is you can now jump to the particular part of the transcript. So if you're interested in a particular part of what happened at the meeting, you can jump straight to the transcript and see exactly who said what and when on the specific topic you're interested in. How is data? How do we handle data quality and this kind of thing? Well, the simple answer is that the original document is always available. So if you have a question mark over something, Win will actually allow you to return to the original document, so you can go and see where it was written and where it was extracted from. The more technical answer is that it passes through a series of gates. In terms of the matching, is it passes through a series of statistical gates. So the AI is not doing any sort of, there's no generative AI, it's purely matching things against different templates. And that means that if something falls below a certain statistical match, it triggers a human review, human steps in, has a look and changes it. Interestingly, all the few times when we have someone has come up with an error, like for example, we had California spelt wrong on a couple of things, that's actually always been human error done by the person who was doing the checking, not the system itself. But essentially, you know, it passes through a series of gates, and that's the system. The other questions we've got have been about, you know, the sort of breadth of coverage and this kind of thing. So I think, Luke, if you could show us how, you know, how you're able to visualize the data nationally and by state and this kind of thing, and then we can drill down into some of the other features.
No problem. Yeah. So if you were interested in projects, you can use our dashboard to identify spending trends across different states. So this map is an aggregated capital spending map that is the sum of all of the projects we collect from all of our CIPs. For example, I could click Texas and I could get a very quick breakdown of capital spending within Texas. This is broken down by application and sub-application. I could sort of select multiple years to see particular growth areas. And then I can click on particular utilities if I wanted to understand that particular utility's capital plan. What I can then do if I wanted more detail, if I was interested, for example, in Houston, I could click and navigate to that utility's full profile. Immediately, I'm given a view of its 5-year capital spending plan. I can see a list of the engineering firms, equipment suppliers, consultants that the utility works with. I get a list of all of its latest meetings, its latest decisions and projects, and then contact information. So if there's somebody I would like to get in touch with, who I know is linked to a particular project, we have a really strong index of contacts that just help you get those touch points with utilities. And if I'm interested in a particular capital plan, I want to understand what Houston is investing in, I can click through and I can see its investment plan broken down by project. I can click on a specific project and it will take me to the project detail screen. I can see that 5-year spending outlook. I can see previous records, so previous entries in CIPs that reference this project. And then we have any mentions of this project, any contract awards, any updates linked to the meeting coverage. So using a mix of capital improvement plans and meeting coverage, you can understand what parts of the CIP are being talked about and contracted out in real time. If I wanted more information, this is a particular engineering contract award. I can navigate to this screen. This is a decision from a particular meeting that we've covered. It picks out what the specific decision was, who was involved, and again, links back to the capital improvement plans. So it's this kind of dynamic dashboard that's growing every day, and it's linking these data sources in a really dynamic way so you can get to the bottom of who's winning work, what work's being carried out, what utilities are spending the most.
Sorry, I was muted there when I tried to ask Chris, but if you go back, you could show the transcript feature there because that's very interesting.
Yeah, no problem. So, for example, Corpus Christi had a meeting yesterday. If I wanted to know what happened, I can click on it. It will take me to the meeting screen. We have our kind of AI reporter on the ground that's written a nice summary of the most significant thing that happened there. But we also have sort of this structured data. So each line item is a particular decision that was made at the meeting. And then if I'm interested in a specific decision, this was a brackish water treatment plant purchase, a containerized system that Corpus Christi procured yesterday. I can see the decision detail. I can see the company involved. But if I wanted more information on actually what was discussed, what were the council members talking about, I can go to the transcript section and I can get a really nice view of exactly what the people in the meeting were discussing around this particular contract award. So it's really transparent in that we provide the structured data that you can ingest, you can download as a CSV, but we also provide the data underlying that, so the source data. So WIN is very much not a black box. It's a system that lets you check data with source documents.
Can you show how we can sort of search for projects? Actually, no, so we had a question about the state revolving fund section. If you could sort of show that, and then a question about contacts. So do we have contacts related to the state revolving funds? We have contacts related to the client. So if you are any utility agency in here, you will have key decision makers, and usually their phone number and email address if that is available, but it will have at least their LinkedIn, and that should be dynamically updated. So when people change jobs and this kind of thing, the system will pick that up and update it.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I've just navigated to a state revolving fund screen. So we collect information from all of the state revolving fund intended use plans. We tell you how much project financing is available for that state for a particular year. We tell you how many projects and how many applicants the state revolving fund has had. You can see the sources and uses for that particular intended use plan. You can understand, the capital flowing in from the EPA, but also exactly how that state plans to spend its capital allocation for a particular year. If you want to understand how we calculated this, we have some nice financing notes, so you can get to the bottom of the way the data is presented. And then we also have the project list. So we have a list of all of the projects that have applied for federal funding in that year. You can see whether the project has been successful in applying for that funding, or whether the project is below the funding line. So for Alabama, you can see there's a significant number of projects that are set to receive funding. I can click on a specific project. It will take me to the project details screen, which will show me some more information, the amount of funding the project's been approved, where it sits on the kind of ranking of projects that have applied for funding that year. We have the additional project details. So these are any information that was included in the source document. So for example, we have information around this project's particular interest rate, the population served at the utility, how much it applied for, how much it's getting. And then, like everything, if I wanted to verify this, I can go to the original source document where I found this project. So it's very important. Everything is linked back to a document, a page number, so you can verify that the data is accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the first people who signed up to this, when it was actually a much more bare bones tool, they said that they thought it was saving their team 200 hours a month just in time spent finding documents. So I think that, and that was when it was at a much more sort of rudimentary level last year. The other sort of good piece of feedback we had is that it's like having a lobbyist sit in all these local committee meetings for you, which I think is also quite a good value prop. A couple of other questions. So does the data drill down into the equipment supplier level of awards, i.e. could I look at what projects and equipment supplier X has won over time?
Yeah, definitely. So if it's approved at a council meeting, we can provide that information. So for example, we have 43 particular decisions related to someone like Core & Main and Ferguson. I could click on that profile. It will tell me a list of all of their interactions, their award value. We have contract awards here for specific pieces of equipment. I can verify this information. I can navigate back to the particular document. I can see who else has bid. So if this has gone out to bid and there's been an unsuccessful bidder, I can find that information. So it is really a comprehensive way of understanding who's winning work, both across equipment suppliers, construction firms, consultants, and our database is growing every day. So we have individual profiles for around 130 companies, but we're scaling up so quickly now that we think we can grow this to at least 500 over the next few months. So this is really valuable data.
So other questions. So is WIN able to distinguish between new greenfield projects versus retrofit upgrades versus ongoing equipment maintenance projects?
Yeah, it can do. So we have a lot of data in the back end that we don't show on the front end. So at the moment, our project filter allows you to filter by sector, application, sub-application, expenditure status, so when the project's starting, state and technology. But we also have a kind of internal filter that we use for type of project, whether it's a greenfield, a rehab, rehabilitation, upgrade. So those are fields that are available on the back end and can come when you sort of export the data yourselves via Excel, because all of the data on WIN is exportable via an Excel download, and there are no limits to the downloads. So you could export as much data as you need, and those additional fields will be available when you do.
We had a question about, is it possible to create custom filter views and send regular reports? Chill's answer is yes. I think that there are sort of two principal sort of user behavior types on this. One is, I want to have access to everything. The other is, I want to be, I have a particular geography, a particular portfolio, I want to be spoon fed. You can do that via the stream. So any filter that you save appears in your streams, and so you can sit there and it'll just populate. You can also receive that by email, but there are lots of additional things that we are exploring in terms of how users can generate sort of custom reports. We can show you the natural language interface in just a moment, but really, what I wanted to emphasize is that, this is a new tool. We're able to iterate extremely quickly. For example, we had a call with someone on Friday night and there was a particular data view they wanted, and we were able to turn that around in 2 days. So we really want to understand how you're using WIN in your workflows, and how we can optimize that. If there are other sources of data, obviously also we have, as Global Water Intelligence, we have a lot of other sort of sources of data which are not accessible via the tool yet. If there are other things that you think would add sort of value to your analysis, it may be that we already have it and we can just put it straight in, or it may be something else that we need to source. But we are, we are, this has been live for 6 months now. I think it's in a very strong position, but we are looking to sort of get people on at a very competitive first year price and help us to sort of build the tool based on very rapid feedback loops. So whatever questions we have. So so is it just high level IUP data, anything more granular, consultant contract or state revolving application player? I think we've covered that. I think I've answered all the other sort of questions straight on. Do you want to, are there any other sort of views that you want to show, maybe the sort of the meeting view, so how it sort of generates summaries of the meetings, and maybe the new natural language interface?
Yes, so very quickly, we realized that we have a whole host of filters on WIN to identify the data that you require, but a lot of the time there might be a specific question that you want answered that you can't necessarily replicate with a set of static filters. So our chatbot allows you to ask specific natural language questions, and if it's behaving, it will give you a nice comprehensive answer based on the data in the platform. So it's essentially giving an agent the tools to tap into all of our data and return a response that matches your particular interests. So I've just asked, top 5 utilities by spending in California, and it's given me a nice breakdown here. I can also ask qualitative questions. So what happened at Corpus Christi's meeting yesterday? It will give me a response. What are utilities saying about a specific subject, say PFAS, or a specific company? it can give you some pretty interesting responses there. So we're rolling this out to customers. It's live now in a beta phase, but yeah, excited to share this with more people. Finally, we produce these meeting takeaways every day. So if you're short on time and you just want a very quick, impactful, what happened yesterday, you can look through some of our headlines. You can click and you can see a specific sort of story. We identify key points here, so you can understand very quickly what happened at a particular meeting, and then you can also see related decisions from that meeting below the sort of brief generated report. And as with everything, you can navigate back to the source file and check the data yourselves.
Do we have any more questions? I think we've answered all the questions on the board. I think the main thing to say is this is available on a annual subscription basis. There's no usage limits within that. The first year price is $12,000 for 12 months, but we are offering anyone who attended this webinar a discount, so they can knock that down to $10,000 for the first year. We can be flexible on the number of seats in the first year, because we are just looking to get as many sort of people on there and giving us sort of feedback as possible. But yes, we're very excited about the tool. We're very excited about the tie-in with WEF, and I think that this is only going to grow. I mean, I think our objective is to have meeting coverage for the 1,000 top agencies by the end of June. I know that a lot of clients asking about sort of smaller utility coverage. We are growing this on a sort of top-down basis in terms of population served. We think we can grow this to sort of total coverage of around 2.5. I mean, we're never going to get to all 55,000 or whatever it is water utilities in North America, but we think that we'll be able to cover the vast bulk of the clients that have real business. And if you are eager to get on board and we are not covering the particular parts of the country that you're interested in, if you submit a list, we can get our team working on those, sort of, even if they're further down in the population, in the sort of population hierarchy. We will share the video and the slides after this, and we would love to do a sort of personal demonstration for you or any of your colleagues that are interesting. As I say, we have a special offer running until the end of Q1, so about a month and a half. So we're very excited to get more users on board in that time. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. I think that's a great way to wrap things up.
Thank you. Have a great day.